My name is Mira Shaw. I'm 34 years old. And 3 weeks ago, I buried my mother, Linda Harmon Shaw, next to my father, Greg Shaw, who'd been waiting for her in that cemetery for 10 years. I was the only child of two parents who'd loved each other in that quiet, steady way that doesn't make headlines. The kind of love that shows up in packed lunches and oil changes and Sunday phone calls. The kind of love I thought I understood completely. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about almost everything. The bedroom was the last room in the house I hadn't touched. I'd cleaned out the kitchen first, boxing up the dishes my parents had received as wedding gifts, the ones with the small blue flowers along the edges that my mother had hand-washed every night because she didn't trust the dishwasher. I'd sorted through the living room, finding old photographs in the bottom drawer of the TV stand that I'd never seen before. My father as a young man, standing in front of a tractor, his hair longer than I'd ever seen it. My mother in a dress I didn't recognize, standing on a beach somewhere, laughing at something outside the frame. I'd sat on the couch for an hour after finding those, just holding them, trying to reconcile these younger versions of my parents with the people I'd known. The people I thought I'd known. But the bedroom was different. The bedroom felt different. The bedroom felt like the last place where my mother still existed, in the impression her body had left on the mattress, in the glass of water on her nightstand that nobody had touched since hospice had called me at 3 a.m. to tell me she was gone. I stood in the doorway for a long time, my hand on the frame, my feet unwilling to cross the threshold. Nate had offered to come with me. He'd stood in the front yard an hour earlier, his hands in his jacket pockets, the October wind pushing his dark hair across his forehead. "You don't have to do this alone," he'd said. "I know," I'd told him. "But I need to." He'd understood. Nate always understands. It's one of the things I love about him. He doesn't push, doesn't try to fix things that can't be fixed. He just stands beside you while you figure out how to stand on your own. The bedroom was quiet in a way that felt deliberate, like the silence was waiting for something. I walked to the dresser first, my mother's vanity, the place where she'd sat every morning for as long as I could remember, brushing her hair, applying her lipstick, checking her face for signs of the aging she fought so hard to deny. The mirror above the dresser was oval, set in a wooden frame that my father had made for her as a wedding gift. He'd been a man who worked with his hands. A man who could look at a pile of wood and see the shape hiding inside it. The mirror had been in this exact spot for 34 years, through my parents' entire marriage, through my childhood, through my father's illness and death, through my mother's quiet decline. It had watched her age in reverse reflection, the lines around her eyes deepening, her hair shifting from brown to gray, her shoulders slowly curling inward. I reached for the frame to wipe away the dust that had gathered in the 3 weeks since anyone had touched it. My fingers pressed against the wood, and something shifted. The backing had come loose from the stand, separated by years of humidity and gravity and neglect. I tilted it forward, and that's when I saw it. A yellowed envelope, sliding out from behind the glass like a secret that had been waiting to be told. It landed on the dresser face up, and I saw my mother's name written on the front in handwriting I knew immediately. Linda, the slightly cramped L the way the D looped back on itself. My father's handwriting. I'd recognize it anywhere. Birthday cards, grocery lists, the notes he used to leave on the kitchen counter when he left for work before I woke up. "Have a good day at school, sweetheart. Love, Dad." I picked up the envelope. It was sealed. The paper was thin, aged, the kind of paper that crinkles when you touch it. I sat on the edge of my mother's bed, the mattress still stripped of sheets, the bare mattress pad rough under my palms. The room felt smaller than it ever had. The walls seemed to be leaning in, waiting. I slid my finger under the flap, and the envelope opened with a soft, tearing sound that felt too loud in the silence. One sheet of paper, front only, dated March 1992, the year I was born. My father's handwriting, small and tight, like he was trying to compress the words into as little space as possible, as if he could make them smaller by writing them smaller. "Linda," it began. "I had the blood test done when she was 6 months old. I know she isn't mine, but she is my daughter. I chose her. I will keep choosing her. If you ever tell her the truth, I will tell her what you did to my mother's land. This is the last time we speak about this. Greg." I read the letter 3 times. The words didn't change. Their meaning didn't shift. Each time I read it, a different phrase cut through me. "I know she isn't mine. What you did to my mother's land. I chose her." The room went still. Not quiet, still. Like the air itself had stopped moving, stopped circulating, stopped doing anything except holding these words in place. My father, Greg Shaw, the man who had carried me on his shoulders at the county fair when I was 5. The man who had driven 40 minutes each way to my college orientation because I was too nervous to drive myself. The man who had squeezed my hand in the hospital during his last week of life, his grip weak but his eyes clear, telling me without words that he loved me, that he was proud of me, that everything was going to be okay. That man had known since I was 6 months old that I wasn't his biological daughter, and he had stayed. He had stayed and never said a word. I turned the envelope over in my hands. On the back, written in different ink. Bluer, newer, like it had been added years later. A phone number. 10 digits, no name, no explanation, just a phone number on the back of a letter that had been hidden behind my mother's mirror for 34 years. I sat there holding that envelope for I don't know how long. The light in the room shifted as the afternoon moved toward evening. Shadows stretched across the floor, climbed the walls, touched the ceiling. My hands weren't shaking yet. That would come later. Right then, I was just trying to figure out which part of my life was real and which part had been performance. The phone number sat in my palm like a question I wasn't ready to ask. Who would answer? What would they say? What else had been hidden from me behind mirrors in the spaces between the stories I'd been told? I thought about my childhood, my happy childhood, my uncomplicated childhood in Cedar Hollow, Illinois, a small town where everyone knew everyone's business but apparently didn't know mine. I thought about the way my parents had looked at each other, the easy affection, the shared jokes, the comfort of two people who had figured out how to exist together. Had that been real? Or had it been a careful construction, a performance put on for my benefit, for the benefit of the town, for the benefit of their own denial? I pulled out my phone and called Nate from the kitchen. I couldn't stay in that bedroom, not with that letter, not with the weight of what it meant pressing down on me. I found something, I said, my voice strange to my own ears. Behind the mirror, a letter from my dad. He was at the house in 20 minutes. I don't remember what I said on the phone. I don't remember if I explained anything or if I just sat there, holding the letter, staring at the wall. What I remember is standing at the kitchen counter, the letter laid flat on the butcher block like evidence at a crime scene. Which, in a way, it was. Nate read the letter once, set it down, read it again. His face didn't change much. Nate's face rarely does. He's a man who processes things internally, who thinks before he speaks, who doesn't fill silence with noise just because the silence feels uncomfortable. He pulled out a chair and sat beside me at the kitchen table. He didn't touch the letter again. He didn't try to explain it away or tell me it might not mean what I thought it meant. He just sat there with me, and that was exactly what I needed. I pulled out the small notebook I carry everywhere, a reporter's habit I developed over 10 years working for the Cedar Hollow Register. I opened to a blank page and started writing, my handwriting smaller and tighter than usual, echoing my father's. 4 questions, one after another. Who is my biological father? What did Mom do to Grandma Evelyn's land? Why did Dad hide this behind the mirror instead of telling me? What's the phone number? 4 questions. 34 years of answers. I never knew I was missing. You don't have to call that number tonight, Nate said, his voice low, careful. I looked at him, then looked at the number on the back of the envelope. The blue ink seemed to glow in the kitchen light. I know, I said, but I'm going to. I spent 34 years trusting a story. The story of my happy family, my loving parents, my quiet and uncomplicated childhood in Cedar Hollow. I trusted it because there was never a reason not to. No signs, no slips, no cracks in the foundation. Or so I thought. Turns out the cracks were just hidden behind a mirror, and that phone number was the first thread I was going to pull. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my apartment, the letter on the nightstand beside me, the phone number burned into my memory. I thought about my father, about Greg Shaw, about the man who had raised me and loved me and never once made me feel like anything other than his daughter. I thought about the words in his letter. I chose her. I will keep choosing her. He had chosen me. Knowing I wasn't his, he had chosen me anyway. That thought should have brought comfort. Instead, it brought a different kind of ache. Why hadn't he trusted me with the truth? Why had he hidden this behind a mirror, in an envelope, in handwriting that tried to take up as little space as possible? By 6 a.m, I was sitting on my front porch, coffee going cold in my hand, the letter in my lap. The October air was crisp, the kind of crisp that hurts your lungs when you breathe too deeply. The sky was lightening in the east, pink and orange streaking across the horizon like a bruise. Nate had gone home around midnight, after I'd insisted I needed to think. And thinking for me means being alone with a notebook and too many questions. At 7:15, I picked up my phone and dialed the number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up when a man's voice answered. Low, slightly hoarse, the kind of voice that belongs to someone who's been awake for a while. Mira! I stopped breathing. I hadn't said a word, hadn't identified myself, hadn't even cleared my throat. Mira, he said again, softer this time, like he was afraid the name might break if he pressed too hard. I've been waiting for this call for 11 years. The porch railing was right in front of me. I gripped it, my knuckles white against the wood. How do you know my name? There was a pause, a long one. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. Your father, Greg, he said finally. He came to see me before he died. He told me about the letter. He told me one day you'd find it. And when you called this number, I should be ready. I closed my eyes. The morning air was cold against my face. I could hear a neighbor's sprinkler ticking somewhere down the street. The normal sounds of a normal morning in a normal town that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else's life. Greg came to see you, I repeated, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. In 2014, the man said. A year before he passed, he drove to my house in Millbrook, sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours. My father, the man who couldn't climb stairs his last 6 months because the cancer had spread to his bones. The man who needed help getting out of bed his final year. He had driven 45 minutes to sit with a stranger. Except Thomas Beckett wasn't a stranger, was he? He couldn't be. Not if he knew my name before I spoke it. Not if he'd been waiting 11 years for me to call. There are things you need to know, Thomas said, his voice careful, measured. But not over the phone, can we meet? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say no. I wanted to drive to Millbrook right that second, and I wanted to hang up the phone and pretend none of this was happening. Before I could answer, a silver Buick pulled into my driveway. I looked up, my phone still pressed to my ear, my heart still trying to find a rhythm that made sense. The passenger door opened, and Pamela Osborne stepped out. My mother's younger sister, 57 years old, church volunteer. The kind of woman who brings casseroles to funerals and makes sure everyone notices. She was already walking toward the house before I could say anything, her heels clicking on the pavement. Behind her, her son Derek killed the engine. Derek is 41, broad-shouldered, freshly divorced, with the permanent expression of a man who believes the world owes him something. Morning, sweetheart, Pamela said, already walking past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. We came to help you sort through things. I hadn't asked for help. I hadn't mentioned anything about sorting through things, but Pamela had never been the type to wait for an invitation. Derek followed her in without a word, heading straight for the garage like he already knew what he was looking for. I pressed the phone back to my ear. I have to go, I said to Thomas. Can I call you back? I'm not going anywhere, he said. I've been waiting 11 years. A few more hours won't kill me. I hung up and walked inside. By the time I got there, Pamela was already in the living room, opening drawers, pulling things out, setting them on the floor in piles she seemed to be creating according to a system I didn't understand. Aunt Pam, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. What are you doing? Sorting, she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Honey, your mother had so much stuff, someone has to go through it. I'm going through it, I said. That's why I'm here. She waved her hand like I'd said something mildly inconvenient. Then she turned and looked at me with the expression she'd perfected over decades, warm on the surface, steel underneath. Your mother promised me this house, she said. She told me herself 2 Thanksgivings ago. My mother had never mentioned that to me. Not once in all the conversations we'd had about the future, about what would happen to the house, about whether I wanted to keep it or sell it. She never mentioned that to me, I said. Well, Pamela said, straightening a stack of magazines that didn't need straightening. You weren't exactly around much, were you? From the garage, I heard Derek opening boxes, metal scraping against concrete, my father's tools. The tools he'd kept organized on a pegboard for as long as I could remember, each one in its designated spot, clean and oiled and ready for use. I walked to the garage door. Derek, those are my dad's things. He didn't look up. Relax, it's just stuff. I watched Pamela from the doorway. She was moving through the living room with purpose, but there was something else in her movements, something watchful. And then I saw it. A single glance toward my mother's bedroom, toward the dresser, toward the mirror. It was quick, barely a second, but it was deliberate. She was checking if something was there, checking if something was missing. That afternoon, I called a lawyer, not Margaret Holloway. I didn't know about her yet. I called a general estate attorney in the next county and asked a simple question. My mother died without a will. Who inherits in Illinois? If there's no surviving spouse and one child, he said, the estate passes entirely to the child. So the house is mine. Legally, yes, unless someone files a competing claim. Someone already had. Pamela had walked into the county probate office that morning, I found out later, and filed a handwritten document she claimed was my mother's last will and testament. 1 page, dated 6 months before my mother's death, leaving the house and all contents to Pamela Osborne. The attorney explained that in Illinois, a handwritten will can be valid if it meets certain conditions. Proper witnessing, clear intent, authentic signature. You'll want to examine that signature carefully, he said. I thought about my mother's handwriting. I'd seen it thousands of times. Grocery lists, birthday cards, the notes she left on the fridge every morning when I was in high school. Have a good day, baby girl. I thought about the document Pamela had filed. I hadn't seen it yet, but something sat wrong in my stomach. The way things sit wrong when you've spent 10 years as a reporter and your instincts are trying to tell you something your brain hasn't caught up to yet. If I did nothing, if I let Pamela's claim stand, she'd take the house. She'd clear out everything, every trace of my father, every drawer, every envelope hidden behind every mirror, and whatever else my mother had been hiding would disappear with it. Nate said it plainest when I called him that night. If you don't fight this, she takes everything your parents built. He was right, and I was just getting started. 2 days later, I drove to Millbrook, 45 minutes through flat Illinois farmland. The kind of drive where the sky gets so wide it makes you feel like you're shrinking. I passed grain elevators, a boarded-up gas station, a church with a sign that read, "The truth will set you free." I almost laughed. Thomas Beckett lived at the end of a gravel road. Small house, white siding, a detached workshop behind it with the bay door open. I could smell sawdust before I even parked. He was waiting on the front steps, tall, lean, silver hair cut short, and his eyes, blue-gray, deep-set, the exact shade I see every morning when I look in the mirror. He didn't reach for a hug. He just stood there in the doorway, hands at his sides, eyes full of something that looked like it had been building for a very long time. "Come in," he said. The kitchen was small, clean, plain, a pot of coffee on the counter, 2 mugs already out, and on the table a cardboard box, the kind you'd store old tax returns in, taped shut with packing tape that had been cut open and resealed more than once. "Sit down," Thomas said. "Then I don't know where to start." "Start with 1991, I said. He nodded, poured coffee, sat across from me. "I met your mother in the summer of 91, he began. "I was building custom cabinets for the diner where she waitressed, the one on Route 4, the place with the pie case in the window." He paused, looking at the table. "She was 23, I was 29. It lasted 3 months, then she told me it was over. She'd met someone, Greg." He looked up. 2 months after that, she was married and pregnant. "With me," I said. "With you." Thomas opened the box. Inside, a manila folder, a small stack of photocopied documents, a sealed envelope with my name on it in handwriting I didn't recognize. "That's Greg's handwriting," Thomas said, pointing at the envelope. "He gave me this box in September of 2014. Drove out here on a Wednesday afternoon. I hadn't seen him in over 20 years. "Why did he come to you?" Thomas set his hands flat on the table. "He was sick. He knew he didn't have long. He sat in that chair, the one you're sitting in right now, and he told me 3 things. I waited. First, he told me you were my daughter. He said he'd known since you were 6 months old, a routine blood panel. Your blood type didn't match his or Linda's in the way it should have. He put it together, and he stayed." He paused. "He stayed. He said it was never a question." Thomas pulled out the manila folder and opened it. "Second, he told me what your mother did. In 1993, Linda convinced Greg's mother, Evelyn, to sign a document transferring the mineral rights on 40 acres of Shaw family farmland. Linda told Evelyn it was a tax adjustment form. It wasn't." He slid a document across the table. "The rights were transferred to an LLC called Harmon Holdings." "Harmon," I said. "That's my mother's maiden name. And your Aunt Pamela's." They set it up together. Sold the mineral rights to a small energy company for $47,000. Evelyn never saw a cent. He let that settle. The third thing Greg told me. He said he wrote a letter the year you were born. Said he hid it where Linda would see it every day, but never dare move it. Behind the mirror, I whispered. Behind the mirror. And he put my phone number on the back. He looked at me. He said when you called, I should be ready. I was still on the highway back to Cedar Hollow when my phone rang. Pamela, where have you been? I've been at the house all morning. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. I was out. Out where? I've been calling. What do you need, Aunt Pam? Her voice shifted. That smooth, orchestrated tone she uses when she wants something to sound like a favor. The memorial is Saturday. I've invited the whole congregation. Pastor Thompson's doing a reading. It'll be beautiful. You planned a memorial at my mother's house without asking me. It's what Linda would have wanted. Don't make this difficult. I stared at the road. Soybeans on both sides, drying gold in the October light. There's also some paperwork I need you to look at before Saturday, Pamela continued. Transfer papers for the house, just to keep things clean, legally speaking. Your mother wanted this. I'm not signing anything right now. Silence, then her voice dropped half an octave. You're making a mistake. I've already told people the house situation is settled. Then you told them something that isn't true, and that's your problem to fix. More silence, then Derek's voice like he'd snatched the phone. Just sign the damn papers, Mira. Nobody wants this dragging out. I hung up. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my jaw was locked so tight my teeth ached. She'd already told the church, the neighbors, probably half the town, that the house was hers. She was building a story before I even had a chance to tell mine. Thomas had given me a name before I left Millbrook, Margaret Holloway, a state attorney, office in downstate Springfield. Greg hired her in 2014, Thomas had said. She's the one who helped him set things up. She'll know what to do. I called her that evening from my mother's kitchen table, the letter in front of me. The receptionist put me through after one sentence. I'm calling about Greg Shaw's estate. Margaret Holloway's voice was brisk, professional, and oddly warm, like a woman who had handled grief for a living and learned to be gentle without being soft. Mira Shaw, she said. I've been expecting your call eventually. That was the second time in 3 days someone told me they'd been waiting for me. I was starting to realize my father had spent his last year alive building something I was only now beginning to see. Greg established a trust in your name in 2014, Margaret said. Approximately $35,000. He wanted you to have resources if things ever got complicated. They're getting complicated. I assumed they might. She also told me he'd left copies of certain property documents with her, mineral rights transfers, an LLC filing, things he wanted preserved outside the family home in case anything was removed or destroyed. I told her about the handwritten will Pamela had filed. Margaret's tone didn't change, but I could hear her pen moving. I'll need to see it. If the signature is forged, that's a felony in Illinois. But more immediately, I can file a challenge on Monday and freeze the probate. There's a memorial Saturday, I said. At the house, my aunt organized it. A pause. Would you like me to attend? Yes. Then I'll be there, and Mira, bring the letter, the original. The next morning, Thursday, I walked across the street to Donna Whitfield's house. Donna is 72. She's lived next door to the Shaw family since before I was born. White hair, sharp eyes, the kind of woman who waters her garden at 6 in the morning and notices everything from behind her kitchen curtains. She opened the door before I knocked. I was wondering when you'd come, she said. Sit down, I made tea. Her kitchen smelled like chamomile and old wood. A clock ticked on the wall above the stove. She poured 2 cups and sat across from me with the calm patience of someone who'd been holding a conversation in her head for 30 years, waiting for the other person to show up. You found something, she said. It wasn't a question. A letter, behind Mom's mirror. Donna nodded slow. I always wondered when you'd come asking. I don't know everything, Mira, but I know some. She told me about a morning in 1993. She'd been trimming her rose bushes along the property line when she heard crying from the Shaw front porch. It was my grandmother, Evelyn Shaw, sitting in the rocking chair, hands in her lap, tears running down her face. She said, Linda took something from me, but Greg won't let me talk about it. Those were her exact words. I've never forgotten them. Did she say what it was? No, and I didn't push. That wasn't my place. But after that, Evelyn sold the rest of the land within the year, moved into Sunrise Assisted Living. She passed there in 2001. Donna set her cup down. I also remember a man, dark truck, blue eyes. He drove past your house a few times in '92, then he stopped coming. Thomas, your daddy Greg was a good man, Donna said, but he carried something heavy his whole life. I could see it in the way he stood. She paused. My grandmother cried on that porch, the way people cry when they've lost something they can't name out loud. Thursday afternoon, the Logan County Recorder's Office. I've spent 10 years pulling public records for the Cedar Hollow Register. Property deeds, zoning disputes, tax liens. It's the unglamorous part of journalism, the part that actually matters. You learn to read documents the way other people read novels, for character, motive, and plot. I filled out the request form for the deed history on the Shaw 40-acre parcel. Section 12, Township 19. The clerk brought me a folder 15 minutes later. The original deed was in my great-grandfather's name, passed to my grandfather, then to Evelyn Shaw in 1978. Standard family transfer. Then a mineral rights transfer dated August 1993. Evelyn Shaw to Harmon LLC. The signature was shaky. The handwriting of a 74-year-old woman whose eyesight had been failing for years. Harmon. I pulled up the LLC filing next. Registered in Illinois, August 1993. 2 members listed. Linda H. Shaw and Pamela R. Harmon, my mother, my aunt. Right there on a county document, plain as daylight. The mineral rights were sold 5 weeks after the LLC was created. Buyer, Prairie Basin Energy, a small exploration outfit. Sale price, $47,000. I kept digging. Prairie Basin had since been acquired by a larger company. The mineral rights still generated quarterly royalty payments. Small ones, roughly $800 every 3 months. And those checks were still being mailed to Pamela Osborne. Her married name, same address. 20 years, over $60,000 total. From rights my grandmother signed away thinking she was adjusting a tax form. I photographed every page, filed them in order, put them in a folder, and labeled it with the date. Pamela wasn't just someone who helped my mother cover a secret. She co-founded the company that stole from my grandmother. She'd been profiting from it every quarter since. I got back to the house around 5. Pamela was already there. She'd let herself in. I still don't know how she had a key. She'd spent the afternoon rearranging the living room for Saturday's memorial. The couch was pushed against the wall. Folding chairs were stacked by the door, borrowed from the church, and the photos were gone. Every framed picture that had hung in the hallway. My parents' wedding. My dad holding me as a baby. The 3 of us at my college graduation. All taken down. In their place, 2 portraits of Linda and Pamela as girls, black and white, matching dresses. Why did you take down the family photos? I asked. Pamela didn't turn around. She was adjusting a vase of white lilies on the mantel. I'm decorating for the memorial. This is what your mother would have wanted. You didn't ask me. She turned then. The smile was patient, practiced. The kind you give a child who doesn't understand the adults are talking. Mira, honey, you've been emotional. Let me handle this. You just show up on Saturday and look presentable. Just show up and look presentable. 5 words that told me everything about how my aunt saw me. A prop, a background figure in a story she was directing. From the garage, I heard Derek loading something into his truck bed. I walked out. He had 2 boxes of my father's hand tools, the Craftsman set, the levels. The old Stanley planes Greg had kept oiled and organized on a pegboard. Derek put those back. They're just tools, Mira. Nobody's using them. Put them back. He stared at me. Then he set the boxes on the garage floor slowly, like he was doing me a favor. When I went back inside, I saw Pamela coming up from the basement. She was holding a small brass key, and she slipped it into her pocket before she thought I was looking. The safe, my mother's safe in the basement. Pamela had the key. Saturday was 2 days away. Saturday came gray and cold. The kind of October day where the clouds sit low and the light never quite arrives. By 10 in the morning, cars lined both sides of Maple Street. Pamela had done her work. The whole congregation of Grace Lutheran was there, plus neighbors, plus a handful of Linda's coworkers from the county clerk's office where she'd worked for 19 years. Roughly 30 people filled the living room, folding chairs in rows, lilies on every surface. A framed photo of Linda, the one Pamela had chosen. on a small easel by the fireplace. Pamela stood near the door, greeting everyone. Black dress, pearl earrings, tissue in hand. She hugged each person who entered and said some version of the same line. "Thank you for coming. Linda would have loved this." Derek stood by the kitchen entrance with his arms crossed, watching like a bouncer at a funeral. Pastor Thompson sat in the front row, Bible on his knee. Donna Whitfield was in the back corner, teacup balanced on her saucer, eyes moving across the room the way they always do, quietly cataloging. I arrived at 10:15 with Nate. Black blouse, gray slacks, hair pulled back. I'd slept maybe 3 hours. In my bag, the original letter, the county documents in a folder, and a copy of the LLC filing. Margaret Holloway arrived at 10:20, navy suit, leather briefcase, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She introduced herself to Pamela as a friend of Linda's from Springfield. Pamela shook her hand, smiled, and didn't think twice. Thomas Beckett was not in the room. He was in his truck, parked 2 blocks away, waiting for my call. 30 people in my mother's living room, and not one of them knew the woman they were mourning had a 34-year-old secret standing right by the door. Pamela didn't wait for the pastor to start. She stood up at 10:30, dabbed her eyes with the tissue, and addressed the room like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. Linda was my best friend, my sister, my rock. Her voice cracked on rock, just enough. She asked me personally to take care of this house after she was gone. She wanted it to stay in the family. She wanted it to stay with someone who loved it the way she did. Pamela looked at me. The eye contact was deliberate. And I know Mira understands. She's been through so much. We all just want what's best for her. A few people nodded. Mrs. Gavin from the church choir touched her chest. Pastor Thompson put his hand on Pamela's shoulder. Then Derek stood up and started circulating a card. White, oversized, with "In loving memory of Linda Shaw" printed on the front. "If you'd like to sign," he said, moving row to row. "There's a small note on the back about the house. Just a formality, making sure Mom's wishes are honored." I watched from my seat as Derek handed the card to Mr. Peterson, the retired postmaster. He signed the front, flipped it over, and paused. His pen hovered. I leaned forward and caught a glimpse of the back. Below the signatures was a paragraph in small print. It read, in part, "We, the undersigned, affirm that Linda Shaw expressed her intention to transfer ownership of the property at 412 Maple Street to her sister Pamela Osborne." She'd embedded a property authorization into a sympathy card. I caught Nate's eye across the room. He'd seen it too. I didn't sign. And when the card reached Donna Whitfield, she read the back, set it face down on the empty chair beside her, and took a long sip of tea. It happened at 11. The card made its way back to Derek. He counted signatures, frowned, and looked at me. "You didn't sign?" "No," I said. "No, Derek." Pamela appeared beside him. She put her hand on my arm gently for the audience and guided me toward the kitchen. The kitchen that opened directly into the living room. No door, no wall. Every word audible to 30 seated people. "Mira, honey, you're being selfish. Your mother just died and you're worried about property. I'm not the one who brought transfer papers to a memorial." Her hand dropped from my arm. The warmth left her face. "Your mother told me you'd do this." Louder now, pitched for the room. "She said you've always been about the money, always taking, never giving back. She spent her last 2 years alone in this house while you were off chasing your little newspaper stories." The room went silent. I could feel 30 pairs of eyes. Derek stepped closer. "Just sign it, Mira. Don't embarrass yourself." I looked past him into the living room. Mrs. Gavin's hand was over her mouth. Mr. Peterson was staring at the floor. Pastor Thompson's jaw was tight. They were deciding right there, in real time, who to believe. The devoted sister dabbing her eyes, or the absent daughter who couldn't even sign a sympathy card. I felt my throat tighten, my hands curl. Every instinct I had said fight back. Say something, defend yourself. Instead, I said, "I need 5 minutes." Pamela blinked. She'd expected a fight. She'd expected tears. She got neither. I walked through the kitchen, out the back door, and into the yard. The cold air hit my face like water. 30 people heard my aunt call me a taker. And in that silence, I could feel every one of them choosing a side. I stood by the back fence next to the oak tree my dad planted the year I started kindergarten. My hands were shaking now. I let them. I pulled out my phone and called Thomas. He picked up on the first ring. "Can you come now? I need you here." "I'm 2 blocks away. I can be there in 3 minutes." "Bring the box." "Already in the truck." I hung up, took a breath, then another. I walked back inside through the kitchen, past Pamela, who was standing at the counter with a glass of water, looking composed and satisfied. Past Derek, who was collecting the sympathy card from the last row of chairs. Through the living room, where no one made eye contact with me. I sat down next to Margaret Holloway. "I need you to stay," I said quietly, "and I need the trust documents." Margaret opened her briefcase on her lap just an inch. I saw the edge of a manila folder labeled in typed font. She nodded once. "I have everything." I sat back, folded my hands, and waited. Pamela watched me from across the room. I could see her trying to read the shift. A minute ago, I was retreating. Now I was sitting still with a calm she didn't recognize. 3 minutes passed. 5, 10. Nate came and sat beside me, didn't ask, just sat. 45 minutes total. That's how long I sat in that room, surrounded by people who'd just been told I was selfish and ungrateful. I didn't explain, didn't correct, didn't leave. I let my aunt believe she'd already won. Because the sound I was waiting for, the knock on the front door, came at exactly 11:52, and everything in that room was about to change. Derek opened the door. A tall man stood on the porch. Silver hair, blue-gray eyes, a cardboard box tucked under one arm. "I'm here for Mira," Thomas said. Derek looked him up and down. "Who are you?" Before Thomas could answer, Pamela was on her feet. She'd been mid-conversation with Mrs. Gavin. The color drained from her face in a way that no amount of composure could hide. "What are you doing here?" Pamela's voice was tight, controlled, but her hands gave her away. She gripped the back of a folding chair so hard her knuckles went white. "You have no right to be in this house." She knew him. She recognized him instantly. 34 years, and she still knew his face. I stood up. I invited him. The room turned. Every head, every pair of eyes. 30 people looking between me, Pamela, and the stranger in the doorway. Thomas stepped inside. He set the box on the coffee table. He looked at me, and for a moment the room fell away. It was just the two of us. A father and a daughter standing in the same room for the first time in their lives. Donna Whitfield leaned forward in her chair. Her teacup stopped halfway to her lips. She was looking at Thomas with the slow recognition of someone matching a 30-year-old memory to a present-day face. Pastor Thompson stood. "Mira, what's going on?" I looked at the room, at the people who'd come to mourn my mother, at the aunt who'd spent the last week trying to steal my home, at the man who'd been waiting 11 years for a phone call. "Everyone," I said, "this is Thomas Beckett. He's my biological father, and he has something you all need to see." Pamela's face told me everything I needed to know. She'd seen that face before, and she knew exactly what was in that box. I pulled the letter from my bag, the original yellowed envelope, faded ink, my mother's name on the front. 3 weeks ago," I said, "my mother passed away. 2 weeks ago I was cleaning out her bedroom, and I found this behind her dresser mirror. It's a letter written by my father, Greg Shaw, the year I was born." The room was dead quiet. No coughing, no shifting chairs, even Derek had stopped moving. I unfolded the paper and read it aloud, every word. "I had the blood test done when she was 6 months old. I know she isn't mine, but she is my daughter. I chose her. I will keep choosing her. If you ever tell her the truth, I will tell her what you did to my mother's land." I lowered the letter. Mrs. Gavin's hand was pressed flat against her chest. Mr. Peterson had taken off his glasses and was holding them in his lap. Pastor Thompson sat perfectly still, his Bible untouched. "My father knew I wasn't his biological daughter from the time I was an infant," I said. "He chose to stay. He chose me, every single day for 24 years. I looked at Thomas. He was standing by the door, arms at his sides. His eyes were red. He didn't speak. "This man, Thomas Beckett, is my biological father. My mother kept him from me for 34 years. She told him if he ever tried to contact me, she'd file a harassment charge against him." A murmur moved through the room like wind through tall grass. Heads turned. People looked at Thomas, then at me, then at Pamela. Donna Whitfield set her teacup on the windowsill. "Let the girls speak, Pamela," Donna said, quiet, firm. Pamela hadn't opened her mouth yet, but she was about to. "The letter also mentions something else," I said. "Something my mother did. What you did to my mother's land." I opened the folder from Thomas's box and held up the first document. "In August 1993, my mother and my Aunt Pamela convinced my grandmother, Evelyn Shaw, to sign a transfer of mineral rights on 40 acres of Shaw family land. They told her it was a tax adjustment form. It wasn't." I set the document on the coffee table for anyone who wanted to look. "They created a limited liability company called Harmon Holdings. Harmon, my mother's maiden name. My aunt's maiden name. They registered it the same month. Then they sold the mineral rights to an energy company for $47,000. The murmur became a low hum. Mr. Peterson put his glasses back on. Two women from the church choir exchanged a glance. My grandmother, Evelyn, never knew what she signed. She was 74. Her eyesight was failing. She trusted her daughter-in-law. Pamela shot to her feet. "That's a lie. Those are fake documents. You don't know what you're talking about." Margaret Holloway stood calmly. She took one step forward and spoke clearly enough for the whole room. "My name is Margaret Holloway. I'm an estate attorney. I'm holding certified copies obtained directly from the Logan County Recorder's Office. These documents are public record. Anyone in this room is welcome to verify them." The room went silent in a way I'd never experienced before. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but full. Full of people recalculating everything they thought they knew. Derek grabbed Pamela's elbow. "Mom, let's go." Pamela didn't move. Her face was white. Her mouth was open, but nothing was coming out. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The documents spoke for themselves. Pamela changed tactics the way a cornered animal changes direction. Fast, desperate. The tears came first. Real or performed, it didn't matter. They rolled down her cheeks as she turned to face the room, her voice cracking. "Linda was my sister. We did what we had to do to survive. That land was sitting there doing nothing. Evelyn's property taxes were bleeding her dry. We helped her." She pointed at me. Her finger trembled, but her voice hardened. "And you think you can stand there and judge us? You don't even know who you are. You were a mistake, Mira. A mistake your mother spent her whole life paying for." The word landed like a slap. I felt it in my chest. 30 people heard it. Mrs. Gavin closed her eyes. The woman from the choir put her hand over her mouth. Thomas spoke, first time since he'd walked in. His voice was low and steady, not angry, just certain. "She was never a mistake. She was the best thing that ever happened to any of us, including Greg. He told me so." Pamela turned on him. "You don't get to speak. You weren't here. You were nothing." "I was nothing because your sister made sure of it," Thomas said. "But Greg made sure it wouldn't stay that way." From the back corner, Donna Whitfield's voice. "I remember Evelyn crying on that porch. Pamela, summer of '93. She said Linda took something from her. I remember." Pamela scanned the room, searching for an ally. A sympathetic face, a nod. She found none. Derek pulled her arm. "Mom, we need to leave, now." Pamela let him guide her toward the door, but she turned one last time and looked directly at me. "You'll regret this, Mira. Your mother would be ashamed of you." The door closed behind them. Derek's truck engine fired. Gravel crunched under tires, and then they were gone. Nobody spoke for what felt like a full minute. Then Pastor Thompson rose from his chair and walked over to me. He took both my hands in his. His grip was warm and firm and steady. "Your father was one of the most decent men I've ever known," he said. "And I think you just showed this room that the apple didn't fall far." Behind him, Mr. Peterson stood, then Mrs. Gavin, then others. One by one, like a congregation rising for a hymn nobody had called. Mr. Peterson crossed the room and extended his hand to Thomas. "You must be the cabinet man. Evelyn mentioned you once years ago, said you were good with wood." Thomas shook his hand. "Still am." Donna brought him a cup of tea. She didn't say anything, just pressed it into his hands and gave him a look that said, "You're welcome here." Margaret moved to my side. The handwritten will Pamela filed. I'll challenge it first thing Monday morning. Based on the signature inconsistencies and what we've seen today, I don't think it'll hold up. Thank you. Don't thank me, thank your father. He planned this a long time ago. Nate stood in the kitchen doorway, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. He caught my eye and gave me a single nod. Small. Enough. I looked at Thomas. He was standing by the window, holding the tea Donna had given him, looking out at the street where he used to drive past 30 years ago and never stop. We didn't hug. We weren't there yet, but we were in the same room and neither of us was leaving. I didn't get a standing ovation. I got something better. 30 people who finally saw the truth. And a living room that, for the first time in decades, had no secrets left in its walls. Monday morning, Margaret filed the challenge at the Logan County Probate Court. By 9 a.m., she'd spent Sunday reviewing the handwritten will Pamela had submitted. The body of the document was close. Someone had studied Linda's handwriting carefully. But the signature at the bottom had two tells. The crossbar on the T in Shaw slanted the wrong direction, and the S had a loop at the base that Linda never used. Margaret had 14 samples of Linda's authentic signature from tax filings, insurance forms, and her driver's license renewal. A court-appointed handwriting examiner confirmed it within the week. The signature shows multiple inconsistencies indicative of simulation rather than natural writing. The probate judge suspended the handwritten will pending further review. The house remained in Mira Shaw's name under Illinois intestacy law. Margaret also sent a certified letter to Pamela Osborne. It requested a full accounting and repayment of all royalty income received from the mineral rights, estimated at $64,000 over 20 years, based on quarterly payments of approximately $800. She'll fight it, Margaret told me over the phone. But the paper trail is clean. The LLC, the deed transfer, the royalty checks, it's all documented. I asked her about criminal charges. You could pursue fraud charges against your aunt for the forged will and possibly elder financial abuse for the mineral rights transfer. I thought about it, I really did. No, I said. I don't need her in jail. I need her out of my life. Margaret paused. That's your right. The civil claim alone will be enough to recover the funds and establish the record. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth to have consequences. And there's a difference. One I was only just beginning to understand. The trust fund arrived in my account on a Wednesday. $35,000. Not a fortune. Not life-changing money by most standards. But it was the most meaningful deposit I'd ever received because every dollar in it carried a decision. Greg Shaw, the man who knew I wasn't his biological daughter before I could walk, had spent the last year of his life quietly setting aside money, pulling from savings, from small accounts Linda didn't monitor. From what Margaret described as a personal fund he'd been building for years. He couldn't confront Linda. That bridge had burned in 1992 when he wrote the letter. But he could build something behind the silence, and he did. There was one more thing Margaret had been holding. A second letter, sealed, addressed to me. Greg had written it in 2014 and given it to Margaret with instructions. Give this to Mira when she comes to you. I opened it in my car, parked outside Margaret's office in Springfield. Alone. Mira, if you're reading this, it means you found the letter. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you myself. I was afraid you'd think I loved you less if you knew the truth. But the truth is the opposite. I chose you every morning for 24 years. That was never a sacrifice. It was the easiest decision I ever made. Everything I've left with Margaret is yours. Use it however you need to. And if Thomas Beckett is a good man, and I believe he is, give him a chance. You are my daughter. Always, Dad. I sat in that car for a long time. The engine was off. The parking lot was empty. I read the letter 4 times and cried every time. Then I drove home and put both letters on the dresser, right where the mirror used to be, where they belonged. The following Saturday, I drove to Millbrook. No agenda, no documents, no questions prepared in a notebook. I just got in the car and went. Thomas was in his workshop when I pulled up. The bay door was open. I could hear the low hum of a sander over a country station playing from a paint-splattered radio on the shelf. He was working on a chair. Pine, from the look of it. Simple design, 4 legs, a flat seat, a curved back, the kind of chair you'd find on a farmhouse porch. He looked up when I walked in, turned off the sander, didn't say anything. I sat on the stool near the workbench, sawdust on the floor. The air smelled like fresh-cut wood and varnish. "I'm not trying to replace Greg," Thomas said after a while. "I couldn't and I wouldn't. I know. Then what do you want?" I thought about it. I thought about the 34 years behind us. The letters, the phone number, the waiting. There was no way to compress all of that into one afternoon, one conversation, one relationship. It would take years, maybe a lifetime. "I want to start from here," I said. He looked at me, then he looked at the chair. "You want to learn how to sand?" I laughed, first real laugh in 3 weeks. It surprised me, the sound of it, the way it came from somewhere deep and unguarded. "Sure," I said. He handed me a sheet of 120 grit and showed me the direction of the grain. We didn't talk much after that, just the sound of sandpaper on wood, the radio playing low. The two of us doing something small and real, side by side. He didn't try to be my father that day. He just taught me to sand a piece of oak, and somehow that was exactly enough. The story traveled the way stories do in small towns. Not through headlines, but through kitchens and parking lots and the produce aisle at Clarkson's Market. By the end of that week, Cedar Hollow knew. Not all the details, but enough. Enough to know that Pamela Osborne had filed a forged will. Enough to know about Harmon Holdings. Enough to know about Thomas Beckett standing in that living room. Pastor Thompson asked Pamela to step down from the church council. He called it a temporary leave. Everyone understood it was permanent. 3 families who had been close with Pamela for decades stopped returning her calls. Mrs. Gavin told Donna Whitfield, "I signed that card. I nearly signed something I didn't understand. That scares me." Derek lost 2 contracts the following week. He'd been doing renovation work for homeowners in the area. Kitchen remodels, deck repairs. Both clients called to cancel after hearing the story. One of them told him directly, "I can't have someone I don't trust working inside my house." Pamela called me once, the last call. "You've destroyed this family," she said. I was standing at the kitchen sink, washing a coffee mug, looking out the window at the oak tree in the backyard. "The family was destroyed 34 years ago, Pamela," I said. "I just found the pieces." She hung up. She didn't call again. Derek moved out of the county within the month. I heard he went to Peoria looking for work where nobody knew his name. I didn't follow up. I didn't check in. I didn't need to know what happened to Pamela after the dust settled. She said I destroyed the family. But you can't destroy something that was built on a lie. You can only stop pretending it was standing. The nights were the hardest part. During the day, I could keep moving. There were documents to sign, calls with Margaret, edits to file at the register. Momentum is a good anesthetic. But at night, in the house alone, that's when the complicated grief showed up. I'd be washing dishes and hear my mother's voice in my head. "Did you eat, baby girl?" I'd walk past her bedroom and smell the lavender hand cream. I'd see her handwriting on a grocery list stuck to the fridge. Milk, eggs, dish soap, and my chest would tighten. She lied to me for 34 years. She kept my father from me. She stole from my grandmother. She let Pamela build a life on a fraud. And she was also the woman who sat on the edge of my bed when I had nightmares, who drove through a snowstorm to bring me soup my first winter in my own apartment, who called me every Sunday at 7 p.m. without fail for 10 years. I couldn't hate her. I tried some nights, but grief doesn't work like a light switch. You can't choose to feel only the clean emotions. The anger, the righteous clarity. The tenderness comes too, uninvited, and it sits right next to the fury. I called Nate one night around midnight. "I'm not okay yet," I said, "but I think I will be." "Take your time," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." I sat on the back porch after we hung up. The oak tree was black against the sky. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once and stopped. Grief isn't one thing. It's not sadness or anger or love. It's all of them fighting for space in the same room. And you don't get to choose which one sits down first. You just make room. 2 weeks after the memorial, a rhythm started forming. Not normal. I don't know if normal was coming back, but a rhythm. Donna came over on Tuesday mornings with pie. Apple usually, sometimes peach. She never asked how I was doing. She just came in, put the pie on the counter, sat at the kitchen table and drank tea. Sometimes we talked. Mostly we didn't. It was enough just to have someone there who didn't need me to explain anything. I went back to work at the register. My editor, Carolyn, had held my column open. I didn't write about my family. I wrote about mineral rights. Specifically, a piece about how elderly landowners in rural Illinois are vulnerable to deed fraud, how it happens, what to look for, what to do if you suspect it. I cited public data, county records, a few anonymized cases. The article got picked up by 2 other papers in the state. The county clerk's office posted it on their website. It didn't fix anything, but it turned something ugly into something useful. And that felt like the first solid thing I'd built since the floor fell out from under me. Thomas called on Fridays, short calls, 10 minutes, sometimes less. He'd tell me what he was building that week: a bookshelf, a rocking chair, a set of coasters from reclaimed barn wood. I'd tell him about whatever story I was working on. "I made an extra chair," he said one Friday. "If you want it, I'll come get it Saturday." When I hung up, I walked through the living room and put the family photos back on the wall. All of them. Greg, Linda, me at graduation. And next to them, a new photo I'd taken on my phone. Thomas in his workshop, mid-sond, sawdust on his sleeves. Because my story isn't about erasing anyone. It's about finally seeing the full picture. I used to think loyalty meant never questioning. That being a good daughter meant accepting whatever story your parents handed you, even when the edges didn't line up. Even when something felt off and you couldn't say why. I thought family meant you keep the peace at any cost. That asking hard questions made you ungrateful. That setting a boundary was the same thing as slamming a door. I was wrong. Loyalty isn't silence, and family isn't a gag order. Pamela used those words. Family, loyalty, your mother's wishes. The way some people use locks to keep you in, to keep the truth out, to make you feel guilty for wanting what you're owed. The basic right to know who you are. I cut contact with Pamela and Derek. No announcement, no dramatic phone call, no letter of my own. I just stopped answering, stopped engaging, stopped showing up to a dynamic that had been designed for decades to keep me small. Some people would call that cold. Some people in Cedar Hollow probably still do. I call it peace. Setting a boundary doesn't mean you don't love someone. It means you love yourself enough to stop accepting less than the truth. And the first time you do it, really do it, not just think about it, it feels strange. Like stepping off a ledge and discovering the ground was only 6 inches below you the whole time. You were never as trapped as they made you believe. I didn't write a speech. I didn't send a manifesto. I just stopped answering. And for the first time in my life, the silence was mine to keep. I think about my dad every day. Greg Shaw, the man who stayed. He never told me the truth. And for a while, I was angry about that. I'd lie in bed and think, why didn't you just tell me? Why did you leave it to a letter behind a mirror and a phone number and a box in a stranger's kitchen? But the more time passes, the more I understand. He was afraid. Afraid I'd think he loved me less. Afraid the truth would make him smaller in my eyes. And so he did what he could. He stayed. And he planned. And he built a bridge from the far side of a disease he knew he wasn't going to survive. He didn't just write a letter. He drove to Thomas's house when he could barely walk. He hired a lawyer. He set up a trust fund. He gathered the documents, made copies, sealed them in a box. He did all of that in 2014, 1 year before the cancer took him. And he did it quietly, without telling a soul except Thomas and Margaret. Some people show love with words. My dad showed love with preparation, with forethought, with the kind of patience that only makes sense when you're running out of time and you want to make sure the people you leave behind have what they need. He couldn't protect me from the truth, so he made sure the truth would protect me when it finally came. I keep both letters in frames now. The one he wrote to my mother behind the mirror, 1992, and the one he wrote to me in Margaret's office, 2014. They hang in the hallway, not hidden, not sealed, not behind anything, on the wall where they belong. Thomas and I aren't doing father-daughter dinners every Sunday. We're not taking road trips or catching up on 34 years of missed holidays. That's not how this works. Not for us. Not yet. But last Saturday, I drove to Millbrook. I've been doing that most weekends now. He was in the workshop like always. The radio was on. He had a new project, a shelf. Simple, clean, white pine. "Want to help?" he asked. I did. We worked for 2 hours. He showed me how to measure twice because the wood doesn't forgive, and how to countersink a screw so the surface stays smooth. He didn't over-explain. He'd show me once, watch me try, and only step in if I asked. When the shelf was done, I took it home and hung it in the living room, above the spot where the folding chairs had been during the memorial. I sent him a photo. He texted back, "It's a little crooked, just like mine." I laughed so hard I scared the cat from next door off the porch. A crooked shelf. The first inherited thing I've ever gotten from Thomas Becket. Not money, not a last name, not even a story. A tendency to hang things slightly off level. I'll take it. We have time now. For the first time in 34 years, we have time. I don't know what that looks like. Whether it turns into holidays and birthdays and long drives together, or whether it stays exactly like this. Saturdays in the workshop. Sawdust and radio static and comfortable quiet. Either way, I'll be there. He'll be there. I don't need him to be everything at once. I just need him to be there next Saturday, and the Saturday after that. That's how you build something. One day at a time. One piece of wood at a time. If you're listening to this and you're sitting on a secret, or you suspect someone in your family is keeping one from you, I want to say this. The truth doesn't destroy families. Lies do. Secrets do. Silence does. The truth just reveals what was already broken. And once you can see the break, you can start building something real. I know it's scary. I know the idea of pulling that thread, opening that drawer, making that call, asking that question feels like it might unravel everything. And honestly, it might. It unraveled mine. The family I thought I had doesn't exist the way I imagined it. But here's what I got in return. I got 2 fathers. One who chose me before I could talk, and one who waited 34 years for a phone call. I got a lawyer who held an envelope for a decade because a dying man asked her to. I got a neighbor who remembered my grandmother's tears and kept them safe for 30 years. I got a man named Nate who stood in a doorway and nodded because he knew I didn't need saving, just someone to stand with. I got the truth, and the truth came with freedom. My name is Mira Shaw. I'm 34 years old. My dad was Greg Shaw. My biological father is Thomas Becket. My mother was Linda Harmon Shaw. And for the first time in my life, I know exactly who I am, because I stopped letting other people decide that for me. The truth doesn't come with instructions, but it does come with freedom, and I'll take that trade every single time. That's my story. I told it because I needed to. And I told it here because I think some of you needed to hear it. If you've ever found a secret that changed everything, or if you're still deciding whether to open that drawer, make that call, or ask that question, tell me in the comments. Was it worth it? Would you do it again? And if this story stayed with you, check out the video in the description. It's another family story I think you'll understand. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for being here.